the Mandarin? He was the villain from the ancient Iron Man cartoon series. He had all kinds of magic rings, including the disintegration ring,
which he used in the dumbest possible ways. Take that, Iron Man! He, disintegrates some of the cliff behind him, causing a small avalanche. Oh no! Rocks falling on Iron Man!
Right, you wouldn't want to, say, disintegrate your enemy. And he always had the most useless minions.
I call forth Living Laser! Living Laser's only superpower that I could tell was to actually be loyal, unlike all Mandarin's other minions.
Well, they all sound more useful than the Riddler. He's like a regular criminal, but he's easier to catch. Game night is the best night of the week. When your friends show up, the snacks come out, and it's time to slay some monsters. But it can also become a source of stress and conflict. Or, in the worst case, it can turn into the NERF Wars. Please like, subscribe, and click the little bell thingy that may or may not increase your chances of seeing the next episode of NERF Wars. Last week, the players defeated the powerful undead Nightwing and some shadows. There was no treasure, of course, but they were able to rest successfully afterwards, which is almost like treasure. With the aid of Sepathula, the sentient flying carpet, they were able to travel the rest of the way unmolested, reaching the deserted Dwarf Stronghold. But then began a new game session, meaning it's interrogation time again, as always. So, Azeron, of all the NPCs you guys have met but haven't fought, no combat, which was your least favorite?
There haven't been that many. We usually kill them.
I'd have to say Heronium.
Oh, yeah, from near the beginning of the campaign. I second the motion. He was terrible.
He was on your side! He was just there to help you! He healed you all many times!
While being yet another holier-than-thou cleric, trying to recruit us and everyone we met as followers for his deity.
Okay, second question for Azeron. Of your many characters, which was your favorite? Whether GM intended it this way or not, most of the players considered this an asinine question, along the lines of, "Hey buddy, have you died yet today?" But while Azeron was thinking about his various characters and deaths so far this campaign, Omit generously supplies an answer.
Go ahead, say it. The one who came in naked.
I would have liked to give her a chance. Guys, are you ever going to let that go? It was just one time, and she wasn't naked, she just had no equipment because she was a prisoner.
She had no equipment because she was a chest burster. His previous character must have spit on the giant who killed him so she could pop out of its chest.
With no equipment, and die again. Fine. Okay, Azeron. Who was your favorite NPC? The NPCs in the last city weren't even jerks? Okay, who is your favorite non-recent NPC? Starting from before Iberia del Fire. From before the latest city.
There haven't been that many. We usually kill them.
I guess it was probably the Cleric of Cord. He was with us a while way back when we were about level 7. He was more than a little pushy about honor and goodness, to the point that we mistook him for a paladin for a while, but he was always in favor of smashing, and smashing is good.
That guy? I guess.
Last NPC you liked was a year ago in real time. Okay, well, I've asked my question, so now one of you gets to ask Azeron something. Anybody?
Can your chain do bludgeoning damage?
No. While you discuss that, I'll ask Omit a question. Omit, would you like me to shove my knee up your mouth?
What? I didn't do anything.
Sure you didn't. No, my chain doesn't do bludgeoning. Spike chain deals slashing or piercing damage.
It's a chain. It should be bludgeoning.
They should be omni-weapons. Bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing.
Does anybody know what beats the DR on the Lich.
I'm sure Omid could tell you that you need bludgeoning and magic, considering he's been flipping through the monster manual.
I wasn't looking at liches. Not that I need to in order to remember their damage reduction.
They are DR-rific.
Right, I'm sure you were just looking up the difference between goblins and hobgoblins.
The difference is they're completely different, but not in any ways that matter at our level. But no, I had the monster manual because Varian was asking me about golem construction costs.
That's true. Man, those things are overpriced.
Yes, I was right and you were wrong, as is always the case. But now that Azeron's interrogation phase is done, real question for you, Omid. How much money's worth in single-use and charge-based items would you estimate that you've used in the last 4 weeks?
He's probably happier not thinking about it.
Omid?
Oh, what? Huh? Sorry, my memory must have blanked for the last 10 seconds.
Then I'll reiterate. How much money's worth in one-shot and charge-based items would you estimate that you've used in the last 4 weeks?
I don't know. Too much.
This would be a perfectly plausible response from anyone else, but Omid has a keen memory and takes detailed, even excessive shorthand notes, to the point that if you needed to know what percentage of the party's damage output 3 weeks ago came from magic versus the percentage that came from melee combat, chances are he could figure it out, given a few minutes. Where would you estimate the numerical value of the items you expended? More than 20,000?
No.
More than 10,000?
Probably around 8,000. Little over 8,000 gold.
Really? You think that's all? How many charges have you just used off the Wand of Dispel magic?
I don't count the cost of that wand, because I didn't pay for it. We got it as loot off one of your mobs.
That's still money value of treasure you're blowing, so how much did it cost? Over 10,000, eh?
Could we skip this next week?
Yeah, why are we still doing this? What? I think it's a good tradition.
Eventually, we got past the interrogation phase and back to the Dwarven Stronghold, which had fallen out of contact, and which, as suspected by Archmage Dom Harad, we found to have been invaded by a Lich, a powerful spellcaster turned undead. Infiltrating some ways into the mountain dwarf hold, we confronted a mighty set of ornate dwarven doors, multiple feet thick. Using a Wand of Blinking, loot from some already forgotten battle, Omid turns himself demi-ethereal to walk through the doors, then casts an enlargement spell to make himself massive enough to operate the heavy locking mechanism. The room contains many undead skeletons who continue their manual labor, taking no notice of the intruder. But as the great mechanism slides into place, a Lich finally takes notice of Omid, casting haste on its cadre of armored, bastard sword-wielding mummies. This week's random roll for control of the NPC had fallen to Omid as well, and hearing spellcasting through the Great Gate, the gnome casts a couple of buff spells on the party, while Varian, the psionicist, casts a couple of buffs on himself. Balkoth and Azeron use their strength, combined with Omid's still enhanced size, and with the, moral assistance of Varian and the gnome cleric, the party forces open one of the massive doors, at which point those outside the room see the mummies, forcing everyone to roll a saving throw against their supernatural fear effect, a save which everyone passes except the NPC cleric, the only person able to cast Remove Fear, who is reduced to a trembling mass of uselessness. Varian lights up the undead villains with a 5-foot-wide bolt of flame that washes around them all the way to the wall at the far end of the room, incinerating a couple of the animated skeletons who happen to cross its path, but inflicting relatively little harm on the mummies, even though mummies are normally weak against fire. Balkoth charges in and starts fighting, only to find that these armored mummies have extremely high armor class and to-hit bonuses. It will take a long time for him to wear them down. Azeron's character, Malavon, levitates up to the 20-foot-high ceiling and lines herself up to hit all 3 mummies with her whirlwind chain attacks. This elevated position is advantageous because the melee enemies can't hit her at all, making it highly unlikely that she would die. This time, Omit has no real interest in firing arrows at the mummies. They take -6 damage from all physical attacks, an annoying power against the fighter types, but even more effective against Omit's arrows, which deal damage more frequently but in smaller chunks compared to Azeron's or Balkoth's weapons. And because it is damage reduction 6/, there's no special material or magic arrow Omit can use to get around it. So he hovers up and back into a corner, quick draws his wand of Dispel magic, and uses it to negate the Lich's haste buff. The mummies are unable to do much about the flying spellcasters, but with so few heroes on the ground to limit their movement, the undead surround Balkoth and generally position themselves to make it difficult for Varian to line them up without also hitting one of his allies. Their attacks on the dwarf are not terribly effective, but they hit just enough to demonstrate that they will deal a lot of damage if their D20 rolls ever stop sucking. But the two warriors get down to work, Azeron's chain flashing back and forth like a ribbon of light, shredding away the armor and desiccated flesh of the ancient dead, and yet leaving his ally utterly untouched. Balkoth hacks at them with a methodical precision, striking only when they are committed in their movements, thus leaving them no good openings to strike him. And the NPC cleric, Donner Lifesaver, heroically cowers outside the doorway, unable to act for another 6 rounds or so. The Lich, a powerful wizard who long ago transformed himself into an undead creature to achieve a twisted version of immortality, repositions to keep its minions between itself and the heroes, then recasts haste on itself and its minions, accelerating their normally deliberate movements. Varian snaps off a quickened area Dispel magic, specifically aiming for the enemy's flame wards, then turns and fires off another line of psionic flame, adjusting his aim to miss Balkoth and still hit the Lich, and 2 of the mummies. He finishes by gliding slowly backwards out the door, as if riding the kickback of his spell, as the shattered, flaming bones of some worker skeletons caught in the blast rain down upon the foe, adding insult to injury. Now, GM decided some time ago that the plus 50% damage dealt to monsters when they are weak against a damage type was too much, and had nerfed that to only plus 25%. But with the flame wards dispelled, the mummies still take appreciable damage from Varian's full power spell. One of the powerful armored corpses manages to break away from Balkoth and use its haste-accelerated movement to chase Varian out the door, so Omit quick-draws his wand of Dispel magic and uses it to negate the Lich's haste spell. Unfortunately, the monster pursuing Varian had already escaped Omit's line of sight, and thus remains hasted. Balkoth, Azeron, and 2 of the mummies exchange blows. As the die rolls of all combatants start to average out over time, Azeron is having a hard time getting through the mummy's high armor class, but they can't even reach him, so he's okay. Whereas Balkoth and they are having an increasingly bloody and dusty battle, respectively. Both sides hitting more often, both sides having a good chunk of damage reduction. Varian blasts out another fiery lance, which kills the one mummy that was struck by all 3 castings of his power, plus a smattering of spike chain attacks. But leaving the lone, still hasted mummy beating on him, since it was taking him too long to hover back up out of reach, with his oak body buff cutting his movement speed in half. The mummy strikes Varian with its ancient bastard sword, dealing more damage than the Scion would have liked, particularly since the damage reduction from Oak Body is ignored by slashing weapons. Ironically, he would have preferred to risk the cursed disease from being directly touched by a mummy, since his DR would have stopped 10 damage from each slam attack. The Lich, frustrated by Omit's continuous dispelling, changes tactics, casting mass cause-light wounds. The negative energy washes over the Undermountain Hall, healing the undead and harming the living. Not for huge amounts, but considering the number of targets, it is very efficient. Then, though already back to full health, the Lich retreats to the back of the chamber. Donner, the NPC cleric, finally shakes off the unnatural fear effect. Omit, so used to the cleric being useless, is not sure what to do. Azeron is uninjured. Balkoth brushes off any status requests, And Varian doesn't mention how beat up he is because he'll reach a safe altitude out of the mummy's reach on his next action. Since nobody the cleric can reach needs healing, Omit has the NPC run into the room and cast Searing Light, burning the Lich for 30-some damage with the anti-undead spell. Pelor smites you! Wait, I'm not playing him that way.
Pelor smites you,
Nerf! Varian decides that he has expended enough effort on the mummies and turns his attention to the Lich, who notably hasn't used any of its higher level spells yet. The Scion casts Disintegrate, which, for the first time since he learned it, does the thing its name says. The Lich fails its saving throw and suffers around 80 damage, collapsing into a pile of dust and equipment. GM is pissed because the Lich, who from full health could have survived the Disintegrate, died in one round. The gnome's Searing Light spell had done just enough to put him in death range. His only revenge is hitting Varian with a painful attack of opportunity as the caster finally floats up out of melee range. At which point, none of the squishies are at any risk from the remaining foes, except Donner, the NPC cleric, who tends to draw less aggro than the PCs, who wouldn't mind if Donner died. So Donner starts healing people in the middle of combat, and Omit and Varian float around uselessly for the rest of the battle, while Azeron and Balkoth make short work of the remaining mummies.
Where are the rest of the skeletons?
The skeletons were effectively non-combatants, since mid-level player characters are statistically unlikely to be harmed by man-sized undead skeletons.
I had the Gimp Cleric turn undead. Oh yeah, that was worth it.
I can't believe you disintegrated it! Well, the Lich is now a pile of dust. Dust and equipment.
Back in 2nd edition D&D, Disintegrate was instant death, regardless of hit points, but made a fairly poor attack spell against humanoid enemies, because it had a tendency to disintegrate all the victim's treasure as well. In 3.5 edition, no longer an instant death spell, it still does vast damage on a failed save, and now leaves the target's equipment unscathed and primed for looting.
Well, I lament for my defeated foes.
Now, obviously, as you might expect, this transitions into a discussion of the Mandarin.
The Mandarin? He was the villain from the ancient Iron Man cartoon series. He had all kinds of magic rings, including the disintegration ring,
which he used in the dumbest possible ways. Take that, Iron Man! He, disintegrates some of the cliff behind him, causing a small avalanche. Oh no! Rocks falling on Iron Man!
Right, you wouldn't want to, say, disintegrate your enemy.
He had tons of different rings, but not all rings were created equal. Like Whirlwind Ring, Telekinesis Ring.
He also had a UFO. In the cartoon, he flew around in a surprisingly large UFO.
Create Food Ring.
The Beholder is a notoriously deadly Dungeons and Dragons monster, consisting of a large, fleshy, levitating body, one great, toothy maw, one large, very powerful central eyeball, and an array of additional eye stalks, each one casting a different, deadly spell at will. Though able to cast multiple eye stalk spells per round, they generally can't use all of them at once, and in some implementations even select the spells randomly. Like the Mandarin, Beholders commonly possess a disintegration eye stalk, but also a telekinesis eye, a flesh-to-stone eye, and, in some older editions, a create food eye, which was the butt of much humor and was later removed from the list because, ecologically speaking, a creature which can create food at will has significantly less incentive to roam the dungeon like a Dalek, shouting, "Exterminate! Exterminate!"
They never explained why the Mandarin had this UFO, or where he got it, and he always had the most useless minions.
I call forth Living Laser! Living Laser was literally just an orange guy that came out of one of his rings. Living Laser's only superpower that I could tell was to actually be loyal instead of fighting with Mandarin's other minions. Unlike all Mandarin's other minions.
Yeah, Laser was more useful than Hypno Chick.
I think he was orange. He was probably stronger than a regular guy, I assume.
Well, they all sound more useful than the Riddler. He's like a regular criminal, but he's easier to catch.
Stupid horse guy was always bothering Hypnotia because he liked her. Blacklash, that was his name. He was useless.
The city is being attacked by Black Manta and the Riddler. This looks like a job for the police. Anyhow, how did Black Manta get into the Justice League? His power was to own a boat. It's possible that Lex Luthor could afford a boat or two for the League. Anyhow, getting back on track, as we eventually did, examining our surroundings, the party found a couple of doors and a long spiral ramp heading down. Varian, concerned about the possibility of enemies lurking down the way, suggested that we loose the mine cart, a heavy metal cart apparently hauled up and down the shaft using heavy chains, to clear off any enemies lurking below and out of sight. It was pointed out that this maneuver, in addition to not being all that bright, was very random and altogether out of character for the ever-lawful Varian Seth. But we did it anyway, so after Balkoth harvested the chains to add to his increasingly massive collection of dungeoneering gear in case we need them, we took the ramp down for over an hour, past countless smashed skeleton miners, finally coming out in a massive network of mine tunnels. We picked a path and headed down it, for lack of better direction, until Omid pointed out that an ancient dwarven civilization had mined down here for many centuries, meaning the tunnels probably extend for dozens of miles with hundreds of forks, and that exploring at random would take eons. So we trudged all the way back up the ramp to check the other doors, while Varian began trying to think of a question to ask via a divination spell without getting screwed. Of the other doors, one contained some wounded dwarves who the party grudgingly take into our care. Unconscious, they could tell us nothing, and would need a couple days of recovery before they could. The second door contained a volcanic furnace setup used for blacksmithing, populated by two Azers, stocky humanoids from the elemental plane of fire, or some subplane thereof, who look like their heads and torsos are just a big flame. These particular ones were easily as stupid as their appearance suggests. Omid and Varian could find no trace of magical memory modification, but it certainly seemed that some brain damage or other condition related to planar binding was preventing them from knowing anything except how to mindlessly, ceaselessly smelt ore. They didn't know their own names or the definitions of basic words, even though Omid spoke their language, Ignan, fluently, with Varian losing his mind trying to come up with a question that would divine the information we needed without being twisted somehow by the GM. By the gods. Donner, the NPC cleric, who is role-played by GM in non-combat situations, had one choice piece of advice for exploring the mines.
Well, under the circumstances, we could split up to search more effectively. What? Why do you never consider my advice?
There was, however, one other detail of the chamber they had not yet investigated. A strange, semicircular stone protrusion, not part of the original structure. The curved rock had obviously been created by a wall of stone spell, but for what purpose?
I knock on it. Does it sound like it's hollow?
No, your keen dwarven stone sense tells you there's more rock right behind and up against the wall. Almost solid rock inside.
Almost.
Anyhow, a couple skeleton workers emerged from the top of the spiral ramp, carrying ore to the smelter.
You cut through the wall while I figure out what to divine.
Well, I'll just stand here and whirlwind attack any more skeletons that come up.
I'm just gonna whirlwind attack the air like this, and if you wander in and get blended, it's your own fault.
Well, I'm going to cut around and make a door-shaped incision. find out what's behind this wall.
After a few minutes of work, Balkoth's adamantine blade is breaking through the thick stone bubble, for lack of a better word.
I'm making a doorway.
Sure, though as you try to cut a usable opening, you are somewhat limited by the fact that you're only 4 feet tall.
How so?
Your opening will be at most 5 feet high. That's a bit of a small hole.
Whoever's on the other side, I think it's them that will be limited by the small hole.
Well, once you pull away the foot-thick chunk of solid stone, it reveals nothing but a bunch of rocks and boulders. It looks like some sort of a cave-in that was being contained by a wall of stone spell.
I'll start to pull the rocks away.
Sorry, maybe I gave you the wrong impression. The rocks aren't loose. They're packed in solid, compacted from however long they've been there. It would still be a lot of work to clear them out.
Fine. I'll start prying out stones with my axe and stuff.
It is truly Palor's work you are doing. I'm not as strong as you, but I will gladly assist in any way that I can.
This is greeted with the same eye-rolling enthusiasm as everything else GM says when role-playing our gnomish healer.
Come on, man. You're just baiting me. Sorry, I only have one adamantine tool.
Instead of bear baiting, it's dwarf baiting.
I'm being perfectly nice. You always react with such hostility.
I'll intentionally chip the stone such that a piece flies off in the cleric's direction.
Are you familiar with gnomish steam-powered heavy hammers? We could clear this away in no time.
Now that the main cutting is out of the way, Balkoth tries to further offend Donner by offering his mining pick to Malavon, who gives up on smashing defenseless skeleton miners for a bit to help dig, which is when they uncover something. A metallic spoke or rod of some sort.
Perhaps I could identify it. Do I have knowledge the planes, perchance? No, Donner doesn't even have spellcraft. He has 5 ranks of knowledge religion for the bonus on turning undead, and he took 1 rank of alchemy because gnomes have a racial bonus to it.
Ah, I'll get out my alchemy kit.
No, he hasn't got one. Those things cost like 3-digit gold.
I'm sure I can scrounge one up from materials around here.
If you can, go ahead. A free alchemy kit would be good. But, of course, if some opportunity arose when we needed alchemy, logically, we should have the skill check done, and the kit would be used, by the individual with the highest skill in alchemy.
GM seems a little deflated now. He can see where this is going.
Donner and I each have 1 rank of alchemy skill, but my gargantuan intelligence bonus far outstrips his +2 racial bonus, assuming that Omid doesn't have us both beat by an order of magnitude. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, telekinetically stealing your alchemy kit.
At that point, something other than a skeleton came up the shaft. A ghoul, sort of a putrid zombie. GM still declared the ghoul too puny to initiate combat. At our level, even squishy Varian could beat a single ghoul in hand-to-hand with his short sword. But he warns the players that it was just barely beneath that threshold. A ghoul is, frankly, a huge step up from harmless miners. You butcher it, but its corpse smells horrible. I mean, the stench it exudes causes nausea.
No, it doesn't.
What? How so?
Balkoth's referring to its save DC. He probably can't even fail the ghoul's fortitude save.
No, and regardless, we aren't in combat with it. I don't expect you to roll saving throws, but it still qualitatively stinks. Azeron tosses the ghoul in the volcanic furnace of the smelting room to dispose of it, while Balkoth tries to find a faster way to excavate the rocks.
I could rig some pulleys with my chains. What could we use as a counterweight?
Well, if some idiot hadn't gotten rid of the only mining cart.
Despite that minor setback, they were surrounded by counterweights in the form of rock debris, and Balkoth's ingenuity prevailed. The excavation proceeded rapidly, and after the rod, he uncovered a metal hand, not unlike one from the Terminator films. Next time on the NERF Wars. That's the end of Season 1. Expect another 10 episodes starting October 2026. But if you can't wait, my supporters at patreon.com/demonac get a new episode about every month. They should already be on the insane episode number 12.
If you want more of my tabletop storytelling for free, without the toxic aspects of NERF Wars, I have a much higher quality animated RPG campaign right here on YouTube called Sea of Secrets.